This time on Poll Hub, when is a poll not worth spending 11 and a half minutes of network news airtime on? Well, we think we might have an answer to that one. Plus, a brand new thing here at the Marist Poll. Is it still secret? Not anymore. The Marist Poll Academy will tell you all about it coming up next. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Marigoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
Okay, so I teed this one up. 11 and a half minutes of network news airtime. What are we talking about in this case? A poll that got 11 and a half minutes of network airtime on MSNBC on a weekend show. Let's break it down.
Well, it was the fifth year of the Black Women's Roundtable had partnered with Essence magazine to conduct a survey of the Sister Vote poll. And so this was aired and discussed on MSNBC as a national poll of the opinions of Black women. The issue here, though, is that it's not a representative sample at all. It was unclear. We tried to track down the methodology of it, and for the best we could figure out is that it was a poll of Essence readers who signed up on the website to conduct the poll. And I think the concern here is that if you're going to focus so much attention and discussion on numbers. Numbers make things look so accurate, so final, so finite.
So scientific.
Yes, and when it's not, it's not.
Well, what I talk a little bit about, I think, if I recall, before we even get into the findings, I don't even know if we have to talk about the findings.
Right, I don't think it's about the findings. I think.
Here's my big problem with this, okay? One of my big problems. I recall many, many, many decades ago reading about a Literary Digest poll.
You
1936.
didn't. You're not even that old. Lee.
No,
you didn't. You you read about it.
Yeah, that we're talking 83 years ago. The Literary Digest poll predicted that Franklin Roosevelt would not be reelected president, 1936, and that the Republican and the poll that, and this is a standard public opinion exercise that we do in class all the time. The problem is that the selection for that poll was done based on the readership opt-in again of the Literary Digest magazine. It's a famous example in surveyed talk. And so this poll predicted the Republican would win. Why? Because the readers tended to be more Republican, not Democratic, and the rest was history. And the one who actually called that election correctly was, Barb, George Gallup.
Yes, exactly, because this was this is one of the first times where he was conducting representative scientific polls, and he came out with the outlandish finding prior to the election that FDR was going to win another term.
So here it is. I never, ever, never, ever dreamed that on Poll Hub we'd be going back to talk about the Literary Digest poll, but it's back.
So I think Ariel Edwards-Levy, who we've had on the show, it maybe put it best. She's a pretty proficient tweeter, and on Twitter she said, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me! It would be great to have more polling on age, gender divides among Black voters, but that is, quote, a poll of some Essence readers who sign up for a website. It doesn't appear to be weighted. It's not representative." And then she points out, and she puts a picture in her tweet, which this is what really sticks in my craw. There is an on-screen graphic that was used in the show that shows what the presidential choice of African-American women between 18 and 34. And it shows that Bernie Sanders is the top one at 18.9%. So not only is this not a survey, a scientific survey, or one that you should be pulling out presidential preferences of a group based on this poll, then they have the audacity to put a tenth of a point on
meaningless
it,
decimal.
which is absurd.
Yes,
it's just and to have this up on screen on a national news show, it is. We have talked about it before. It is a really it is a misuse of polling.
And I think what's really unfortunate here is because there is a dearth of information about how people of color feel not only about the Democratic primary, but on issues in general. When preparing to talk about this topic today, I figured I would just kind of go to the Google, as we like to say around here, and also go to a lot of our databases and sources for other polls. And it's really difficult to find surveys that are done scientifically with a representative sample for African Americans in this country, for Latino Americans in this country, for Asian Americans in this country, because they are a smaller proportion of the overall population, and it does require a good amount of resources, time, to be able to have a representative sample. But I think it's incredibly worthwhile and very, very important.
So when we do a poll, we have what's called an N size, which is the number of interviews that we complete of maybe 850, 900,000, 1,200, someplace in that range. How many of those interviews are of African Americans?
So African Americans represent approximately 12% of the adult population in the United States. Latinos represent about 14 to 15% of adults in the United States. So do the math.
So
of 1,000, that's
maybe
120 to
so maybe 120 are African Americans, but because of the way survey science and statistics works, you can't really draw much of a conclusion from those 120 that is you can't extrapolate from that. Well, let's break that down into women, so that's half of them, and 18 to 35. Now you're talking about 18 people or something.
Exactly.
You can't draw any conclusions.
There's so many slices in a pie that are allowable in this, and we can talk about a smaller subgroup with the caveat that the error margin increases dramatically for that, and if it's too small, we don't even want to tell you.
And we talk about, when you said the subgroup or the subsample, when we were talking about African Americans as a whole, so a sample size of 120 is something where we can talk about those overall conclusions. But Jay, you're absolutely right. You don't want to then be slicing and dicing that group of interviews into smaller pieces.
So when we do say, and we do look at our poll, and we talk about our poll and other people's poll, and say, well, African Americans are, very supportive of this policy or this candidate, or very not supportive or whatever, we're talking about African Americans, all voters, male, female, all registered voters or adults that are African American. Just to be clear, that's fair to talk about because it's a fair statistical number, but we can't start slicing and dicing that down because there's just no way that can be fair.
And I think when it comes to the Democratic primary, and we start looking at polls that are going to be looking at who's ahead and who's behind in all these states in a few months, it is really important to note that African American women are going to be a very large proportion of the electorate in many states. They are registered, perhaps not at the 97% as noted in this non-scientific
this event
question.
This event.
I don't even want to call it a poll, but they vote in the same proportion or very close to the same proportion as women of other ethnicities. And so I think it's something that is very critical to look at, to anticipate, and to understand. This wasn't the poll.
Yeah, and if Groucho Marx were here, he would say, "You took the words right out of my mouth." Okay, so let me just add another point.
Groucho Marx?
It was it sounded more like Harry Enton.
It was Groucho Marx having passed a long spell in the Borscht Belt.
Oh my goodness!
It was a horrible Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
Anyway, what did Groucho say?
Okay, well, but he wouldn't say anything about this, but he the quality polls, we got to be very wary of the fact that there's going to be a lot of non-quality polls out there. This is a great example of one of those. And then the other thing we have to write, and Barb was talking about, this is an important constituency within the Democratic Party. And, in this result that they have, they generalize. So you can't generalize from a non-representative sample, but they're talking not about in the findings, the people who responded to this survey say black women think. Black women think. So as if it were already generalized to that larger sample, larger population, and that's another problem. So lots of problems on this one. Hopefully we won't see a lot more like it, but my fear is we probably will.
So in anticipation of seeing a lot more polls that are not really polls. We've been working on a project here at the Marist Poll called the Marist Poll Academy, and we have with us today Daniela Charter, and she's the director of our Survey Center and Educational Services. And so, welcome, Daniela.
This is a return appearance, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. But have you really been working on stuff?
I think I have.
Yeah.
And what
pretty
exactly
hard.
has been going on in that corner of your world at the
well-
Institute for Public Opinion?
Well, aside from doing some polling, we wanted to create some courses for our academy about polls and what they're actually really made of. I think a lot of people pay attention to polls, they talk about polls, but they don't necessarily know what really goes into polls.
And we talk a lot here about how numbers can be misrepresented, misconstrued, misreported, and also how polls can be just misunderstood.
Absolutely. I think there's some a lot of rumors floating around out there, especially after the 2016 election. And part of what we're doing is setting the record straight and letting people know what really goes into a good poll and why polls don't always get it wrong.
And I think, and I want to talk about the topics in a second, but I think this is a good opportunity also because so many people, consumers of polls, have questions. Why have I never been surveyed? What do these results mean? Is this really a legitimate operation? And I think we hear a lot of that, and it's going to be, I think, and this is a little self-promoting, it's going to be great to be able to direct people in that direction. Like, okay, well, if you want to find out more, and if you're really serious about this, and you're just not using social media to beat up on us, here, we've put this together, spent a lot of time, boom, go look for it, learn a little bit more. It's part of our whole educational mission, and I think I'm really pleased. I know, Barb, you've wanted to have something like this for decades.
Well, Jay, I'm actually want to bring Jay into this as well because Daniela was not doing this alone. Many folks here at the Institute for Public Opinion were working with her to put this together and at Marist College. But Jay was actually one of her partners in crime. So, Jay, what are your thoughts about why this is something that might be of value to people going into the presidential election?
Sure. This is, by the way, called the Marist Poll Academy, and it's an online learning platform that has launched, and you as loyal listeners to the Poll Hub podcast are going to get a link in the show notes to be able to jump in and take these courses ahead of the general public. So, hey, special reward for podcast listeners. What
That
we
and a
did,
token.
what we set out to do was to provide the answers to questions that all of us who, as a former political reporter, I used to get as a reporter, but now working at the Poll, I get, and all of us get all the time. Basic questions that display kind of a misunderstanding of what polling is and does and what it means.
Like what?
Like, for instance, the idea that we've just talked about this, the idea that every poll is alike, that a survey of Essence readers, as we were talking about in the last segment, that is basically people who are asked, do you want to participate in a poll? Okay, you get to participate.
If you're a reader
If
of
you're a
Essence.
reader, right, and just go online and do this, is no more similar to the kind of scientifically significant and valid surveys that we do, Quinnipiac does, Monmouth does, these other organizations do, than a horse and buggy is to a Ferrari. I mean, they are not alike. They are not the same thing. And that's one of the things that we hear a lot is, well, what about this poll? Well, that's not a poll. And I think that's really important to give people an easy and quick way to learn some of the fundamentals about poll, not to turn them into survey scientists, but to give them a basic language and understanding of something that 20 years ago was maybe an asterisk. It's not. It's central to how we understand politics now, for better or for worse. It's central to that. And I think if we are not literate in polling, if we don't have poll literacy, we fail in our attempt to create a good democracy.
So, Daniela, how did you go about trying to make polling interesting? if that's even
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. Well, that I think Jay hit on one of the most important points, and that's that we're doing something that people might not find that interesting, and they might find it a little bit complicated. And doing
It's
it
not
in a
Dancing
more,
with the Stars.
right?
Although Lee, I believe, is going to replace Sean Spicer. That's what I'm hearing. That's a rumor.
That's for another.
I
That's
don't
for
have
another
the
episode.
outfit. I don't have the outfit for that. My neon shirt has not arrived yet.
Yeah, Big Bird will lend you his.
But trying to do it in not such a complicated fashion or boring way, like for instance, if we're talking about probability or we're talking about margin of error, people might roll their eyes and be like, oh, that's, I don't want to talk about statistics. I don't want to talk about that stuff. I just want to know what these numbers mean. Well, you kind of need to know about probability and about margin of error to really understand what these numbers mean. So we do it, or have attempted to do it, and I think we did a pretty good job of doing it in a fun and easy, self-paced kind of way.
And one of the
for people to
ways we
learn.
do that, and this is what Danielle brought to the table in such a strong way, was using animation, video animation, not to make it a cartoon, but to explain difficult concepts using the things that we understand. So, like
Who's the audience? Who is the audience?
journalists, political pros, educators, anybody who is talking. And you get on Twitter, it's not those people who are just talking about polls, it's everybody. So I think that polls used to be, again, that asterisk kind of thing in American life. It's not anymore. It's central to our understanding of American life.
It helps determine who makes it into debates or not.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
another
that's
topic.
Another
All right, so
topic. Right,
let's talk about some of the topics, though, that people will find when they look into this, like what's a poll? How do you
What is
poll?
a poll? Why do you poll? Poll modes, and which, I mean, that's certainly a question that comes up. What about online polls versus phone polls? We talk about phone polls being the gold standard, but yet we run into the issue of people not really answering their phones anymore. But if we go to online polls, are they going to be as good as the phone polls? So we get into all of that. We also talk about writing the questions, good questions versus bad questions. How the question is written can determine what the response is. And
then there's the course that our executive producer, Mary Griffith, is the instructor on. And that is in some ways kind of the most basic but most important, which is what makes a good poll. And what we've done is we've modified a pretty famous checklist in polling science, and we've taken it down to 10. We've gone from 20 to 10 because short attention span.
It used to be 20 questions a journalist should
Right.
ask about polling.
And now it's
by our friends Shelley Geweiser and Evans Witt.
Yep.
And now it's the Marist Poll Quality Checklist, and it's 10 questions that you can ask to determine whether a poll is worth your time or not. And that's a great course that Mary teaches that I think really gets to the essence of of how this is news you can use or learning that you can use. It's not something you just drop information in a cocktail party. It's actually the kind of thing that's gonna help people in their daily lives in a lot of ways.
And there's also a section, I believe, on election polling, which kind
Absolutely.
of taps into some of the issues that we will see in polls coming forward in 2020. What's next?
The next thing beyond this is we are in the process of creating what we're calling case studies. And one of the things about any course when you're designing a course is that it needs to stand the test of time. So we all remember textbooks from when we were in school where they're citing something that happened 40 years before, and we're all like, oh my God, what's that? So we need to be topical, we need to be current, but at the same time, we need to talk about things that have actually happened. So one of the things we've done in the courses is tried not to tie things to specific events, but we're creating case studies that live a little bit outside the course that bring alive the concepts. And one of them is one we're producing right now with Lee, which is about this question about debates. Should polls be used to say who's qualifying for a debate or not? So we're turning that into a visual video case study that will live alongside these courses and bring them to life.
So there will be some features that will relate and be updated as the campaign and as issues come up in polling.
You know, if this works, we'll be nominated for a Poll Academy Award. I bet somebody's going to say that does it for this edition of Pull Up. I bet
Couldn't
somebody's
have
going to say
said
that.
it better ourselves, Lee.
Why don't you go ahead
All right,
and say
I'll
that?
take it out then.
And
okay.
Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Thank you, Mary, for suffering through all of this. And Casey Schaff is our editor.
And what would we also like to do? We'd probably like to thank the Roper Center. Their archives are held at Cornell University, and they help us with looking back in time, identifying trends, survey questions, results, and we'll be looking a lot at them during the election season.
And if you've got questions, reach out to us on social media. We're at Marist Poll, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and in the show notes, you're going to see a URL. It's academy.maristpoll.marist.edu. If you're driving, don't write that down. Don't take your eyes off the road. It's in the show notes. You can click on that and register. What we didn't say about Marist Poll Academy, it's free. That's right. We're giving it away free for right now.
Wow.
So click on through, register, and take those courses, and let us know what you think. There's a way to give us some feedback, too, and we would love to hear what you think about that as well. And we'll see you next time.